The Committee of the Whole meeting of Tuesday, February 8th to order. Please call the roll.
Alderman Stralchuk?
Here.
Alderman Bushy?
Here.
Alderman Meyer?
Here.
Alderman Hancher?
Here.
Alderman Garrow?
Here.
Alderman Parrish?
Here.
Alderman Schneider? Here. Alderman Nervin?
Here.
Mayor Worth?
Here. We have a quorum. Before we get going on our regular agenda, I'd like to at least acknowledge that we have some Boy Scouts. If you could, can you tell us maybe step to the microphone, tell us your scout troop and who we have here.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dan Deppis. I'm Scoutmaster for Troop 852, and we're proud to have our scouts here that are learning citizenship in the community merit badge.
Great. We always appreciate it when our younger residents of the community show up. So we'll try not to be too boring, but we probably will be. But this is good stuff. The first item of business is to approve the meeting, and we do the Pledge of Allegiance, but it's at our regular meeting that starts in an hour. Our first order of business is to approve the meeting minutes of January 11th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve? Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any corrections, comments, suggestions? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
I would ask that we have a motion to suspend the rules and take up items 4 and 5 before number 3 for a couple of reasons. One, we do have some guests here on item number 4, and we might as well take it up so they can leave. And secondly, we want to make sure that we get through 4 and 5 and then use the remaining time for reports, because you'd hate to not be able to address the true business items and get bogged down elsewhere.
Make a motion to suspend the rules and take up items 4 and 5 first.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? The ayes have it. So we'll take up resolution 3913, and this is a resolution authorizing the borrower of not to exceed $9,620,000 and to provide for the issuance and sale of general obligation promissory notes. I hate the word therefore, so I'm not going to say it. If we could have a short presentation, and then we'll see if we have questions.
Certainly, I'd be happy to kick things off. Thank you, Mayor. Greetings, council members.
Is this your first time at a council meeting addressing the council?
I don't think,
Well, maybe for the
not my
cameras,
first
why don't
time,
you tell people who you are also, if you would.
sure, I'm Jennifer Engroff, the Finance Director for the City of Mequon for about 5+ months now.
Thank you.
So, like you said, we are here to approve the resolution for the approximately $9.6 million borrowing. The components of the borrowing include the 3-year road program at $5 million, Highland Road Interchange project at $1.75 million, the Town Center Public Projects for $2.7 million, and then associated debt issuance costs of $170,000 for the total of $9.62 million. In attendance this evening, we have a couple of representatives from Ellers, Phil Carlson, who will be walking us through the process of debt issuance. And then we also have a couple of esteemed colleagues here. Kristen Lundeen from the road program perspective can answer any questions related to that. And then we also have Kim Tolson from the town center improvement aspect. So I'll give it away.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Phil Cosson with Ellers. Nice to be with you. My first time here, at least in the last 10 to 12 years. I was here quite a while ago. Dawn Gunderson, as you probably had met a number of times, retired in October. A longtime colleague of mine. So nice to be with you tonight. Thank you for moving us up on the agenda. We always appreciate that, Mayor. We wanted to first thank city staff. We've been working diligently on putting together this financing, but also been really focused in on a longer range capital plan for the city as well. And tonight's focus is really on the 2022 issue that Jennifer just went through with you. We will be, if you give us authorization tonight, starting the process, which is customary process for us to take a municipality through a debt issue, and I was just going to walk through that really quickly with you. First, again, tonight is authorization. We're not looking for approval of anything, but really authorization to proceed with a capital borrowing for the city of Mequon. That'll set in motion a couple of things. One, we'll prepare what's called an official statement, which is like a prospectus on the city. We'll count a great deal on city staff to provide that information. We'll prepare that document and have that available for potential bidders, underwriters, banks that would line up and bid on the bonds. We'll also be holding a call with S&P. Standard & Poor's is the city's rating agency. We have already scheduled that meeting for February 24th. We're not jumping ahead of the process. Rather, they're very busy. We want to get on their calendar, and so we do have something scheduled with them February 24th for a call. We'll rely again heavily on city staff to assist us in that rating call. We fully expect the city will retain the rating that you currently do have. From what we see and looking at your financials, not a lot has changed. You continue to grow. You have great wealth indices. You have a strong fund balance, so we would expect nothing but good news coming from S&P. Once we go through that rating call, we'll distribute the official statement, that prospectus that I talked about again. And on March 8th, we would take bids from different potential underwriters and banks that will set up. This will be a very attractive issue. $9.6 million, 10-year note will be very attractive to different underwriters and banks. We would expect a fair number of bidders that would set up and be interested. So we'll take bids on March 8th. And we will compile that information and be in front of you again that evening to present that information, the bids, the winning bid, and ultimately what that financial impact is at that time. And then finally, we would have a closing schedule for March 24th. That's when the funds would actually be wired from the winning bidder to the city for deposit, so that you had those funds available for the different capital expenditures that you are looking to finance tonight. So that's the process that we will take you through. It's a similar process we took you through in 2019 for your street projects back in 2019 as well. So with that, if you have any questions, process, timing, more than happy to answer those.
I just had a curiosity question. What makes an issue attractive? You mentioned that
Yeah,
it
there's
was
a couple of things. One, the size of the issue, quite frankly. This will be what's called bank qualified, meaning you're going to be issuing under $10 million in a calendar year. So bank qualified really means that there is tax advantage for different banks and underwriters to purchase the bond. So that'll make it attractive that it's being qualified. It broadens the market of who will bid. The size of the maturities, the fact that, we're going to have blocks each year, maturities that are going to be $500,000 plus, will be very attractive to different underwriters. And then, quite frankly, your rating will make it very attractive as well. A very strong rated community. So as a result of that, we would expect a lot of interest.
Thank you.
Alderman Meyer.
Good evening. My question is on the rating. It said inside there that the previous notes were at AA, and it said that the city will request a new rating. Question is that a requirement? We have to do that? Request a new rating? If we do, AA is good, not the top, but I mean, it's really good. First of all, are we required to do it? Second of all, how much does that cost? And third of all is the fact of how much additional savings or lowering of interest rate are you expected that we can do that? Because, from AAA, AA or that inside of there, it doesn't seem that there's going to be that much of a difference in that interest rate in order for recoup any cost involved in doing that at all.
Can you pull your microphone up? 'Cause
I'm sorry.
I'm having trouble at the end hearing you, so I'm guessing other people can't.
I'm sorry.
I think I got the questions. Was there anything else?
That's basically it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's a couple of questions in there. One, For every notch, and a notch is every time your rating moves up or down one notch. So if you went from double A to double A minus or A plus, and every notch is usually about 10 to 15 basis points. So on a $10 million issue, it is significant. So from a cost perspective, it's important to retain your rating. Are you required to? No, you're not required to. However, S&P, just like the other rating agencies, will do a surveillance rating annually if you're not active. And so they're going to kind of take you through that process anyhow, because you have the rating on the outstanding bonds as well. So it's not just this issue, but the outstanding bonds. The bondholders of those outstanding bonds want to make sure that the financials haven't really changed for the city. So this is an opportunity to two things. One, rate this issue, but also affirm the rating for the outstanding bonds that other bondholders have as well. So we would highly recommend, given, again, the rating that the city has, that you go through the process of the rating. The rating cost is somewhere around $13,000 to $15,000. Given the size of this issue, we think it fully will pay for itself out of the rates that will be received versus doing it non-rated.
It'll be interesting to see that when it all vets out on that, to see if it changed or we just spent $15,000 for it.
Yeah, I think the other aspect that you could look at would be how did your bonds, or in this case notes, sell versus a non-rated issue. And we sell smaller communities non-rated as well. So that would be another comparison. You get a full feel for what the impact of your strong rating is.
Other questions? Alderman Garrow.
I guess I really don't have any questions, but for the 3 or 4 viewers who might be watching this on TV, I always get a kick when I watch these guys on TV talk about inflation in such an easy definition, and the definition's just too many dollars chasing too few goods. And in the last couple of years, we dumped the money supply, I think, increased over 30% because of COVID and because of all these different things. So I think you guys are familiar, and everybody probably on the Common Council is familiar, that they're going to be raising rates maybe as many as 5 to 8 times this year to try and slow inflation, which is 7%. They say 7%, but that's minus food and energy. They took that out a few years back. But when I was in the municipal bond business since 1980, retired a couple of years ago, and I remember at one point in time these bonds were trading at 14.8%. 14.8% for A-rated, AA rated bonds and MBA-backed bonds. So issuing debt at this point in time is the exact time you want to be doing it. It's exact time you want to be doing it. You get it. I had other questions, but you already answered them. But we've been really prudent on the Common Council as issuing debt when these interest rates have been so low. And it's been very beneficial, and going out 10 years at the rate that you're going to get is really going to be beneficial, especially with inflation. I mean, you're actually paying it back with cheaper dollars all the way through. But I don't have any, I just wanted to add that in case anybody was watching and actually wanted the real definition of inflation, because you don't see it on TV.
Alderman Parrish.
Hi, good evening. Welcome.
Thank you.
Had some just really basic questions. Probably for Jennifer, for starters, what percentage of the $9+ million is deployed right away versus sitting in cash? Or
I would
X number of
probably
years?
bring in, city staff, because they know probably the timing of their projects and when they anticipate to utilize the funds.
And this is a higher amount than we normally borrow, correct?
I think the last issuance about 3 years ago was $5 million for the road program,
Yep. And now we're doing the town center, which is
which,
warranted. Okay.
but the town center,
Can Alderman, excuse me, I call you that again. Can Administrator Jones supplement that?
I'll see if I can jump in and answer Alderman Parrish's first question. With respect to the roads, within your packet, we have a road program proposed for 2022 that contemplates about $3 million worth of spending. Within this $5 million borrowing proposed over 3 years, we would expect the expense of about $2 million on that $3 million program for this coming year. In addition, the Highland Road interchange is going to be constructed here in 2022. We anticipate at the staff level that those invoices from WISDOT will be coming to the city's attention here in this calendar year, and so those monies will also be deployed. And then, as the council knows from past discussions, efforts are moving forward in earnest to deploy the various construction improvements that were approved at the TID workshop last May. We are under a deadline to spend those proceeds, and that is mid-2023. So we would expect over the next 12 to 15 to 18 months or so to be spending the majority of those dollars to get the work done on the OIT crossing, the utility burial, and all of the other attendant projects that were previously approved.
Thank you. That answered the question I was getting at, which is we don't have a lot of cash that we're paying debt service on until we deploy it. My only other question would be, given kind of some of the piggybacking on what Alderman Garrell said, just about the inflationary environment, possibly 6 or 7 more interest rate increases yet this year, and with the debt issuance, you just said late March, are there any ways to hedge some of our interest rate risk and just get the best deal for the taxpayers?
Well, what I can tell you is that we started having this discussion about about 6 weeks ago, probably in earnest. And at one point, we had talked about a bond sale occurring as late as May and as early as March. So we have been working diligently, collectively as a group, to try to move this forward as quick as possible. So there's been a lot of work behind the scenes already that have moved this forward. We got the final cost numbers from city staff, and over the last roughly about 6-7 days, we have been able to put together the perspective or the pre-sale report along with the resolution that you have in front of you tonight. So it does take roughly 30 days to get through a sale process, and because of the rating call, the preparation of the official statement, so we can't really flip it really quick, but we're trying to move this as quick as we could, and by March 8th we would have bids in hand.
Thank you.
And Alderman Parrish, I would just add that the Federal Open Market Committee is scheduled to meet March 14th and 15th, and we were shooting to beat that deadline and issue the bonds before any uptick in interest rates.
Well done.
Alderman Nervin.
I had a question for Director Lundin about the road program. I know the $5 million over 3 years is consistent with what we've done just about forever. But noting the issues with recent inflation and cost of materials and cost of labor, is it going to be enough over the long run? And you might not have an answer tonight. Maybe this is a lead into a future discussion later
Come on,
this
the answer
year.
is always it's never enough.
Yes, no, I was going to say that's
Well,
an easy answer.
To keep up with what we've been doing historically. I mean, we could debate if that's enough in and of itself, but it feels like we, at the same dollar value per year, we might be losing ground. Maybe we won't know the answers till we get more shovel-ready projects going.
Sure. Yes and no. The good news is because we've been so diligent for such a long time in taking care of our roads, we're able to be in a better cycle. So as it relates to longevity and being able to complete interim improvements, for example, the utilization of a mill and overlay versus a full reconstruct, which we complete as a pulverize and overlay, help save us some costs, extend the life of the road an additional 10 to 15 years to get us through to that next 25-year improvement. Unfortunately, we have somewhat diluted the road program. We've, lumped in all of our right-of-way assets, so that includes streetlights, sidewalks, traffic signals, drainage improvements, and other things. So unfortunately, the dollar doesn't stretch quite as far for literally road-related items, but In addition to having a sizable borrowing, we usually also have a sizable road program. So to the extent that prices are good, we tend to get favorable ones. So obviously, when we go forward with award, if we ever saw anything out of skew, we would recommend not moving forward. But it's never going to be cheaper than it is doing so now. So.
Oh yeah, the money's cheap now.
Well, and I don't anticipate, I mean, despite what we may all like to think about, volatile pricing for petroleum and things like that, we typically only ever see the uptick in material costs, not necessarily the savings. So,
It's like going to the gas pump for everyone
Yes.
else. It goes up instantly, it takes forever to go back down.
correct.
Alderman Meyer.
Just one quick question pertaining to the reoffering premium. It says in there that the underwriter will retain a portion of it. Is there a standard percentage that they retain on that for it, or is it just at their discretion they're going to?
Yeah, this
And
is,
I'm not talking about a dollar amount. I'm just talking about
yeah,
percentage.
this will, I apologize early on. This will get into the bond nerd that I am, but so what's happened in the market with low interest rates, we would say that I would estimate, I don't have an exact number, that probably 80 to 90% of the bond issues that we sell on behalf of our municipal clients and school districts have a premium. And what that is they will actually provide you with more dollars than you're looking for, so that they in turn can sell on the secondary market at a higher interest rate. And they're able to mark up the bonds and make it more attractive for the investor. So what do you do as a city when you get that premium? You have a couple of options. One, the premium can either go into a capital project fund and fund additional projects, or what most communities do, they'll put it into their debt service fund to help make debt payments, interest payments on the existing issue that you're working on for a year or two. So we would expect, quite frankly, that we're going to see a premium here. It's not going to be very large because we have some restrictions due to that $10 million cap I had talked about earlier. So that'll limit the premium that can be provided. So we've already factored in that the max premium will be about 2% of the issue that they could provide in the way of a premium. What they are allowed to also underwriter take is what's called a discount. And a discount is like a point in a mortgage, if you will, something in concept like that. But they will bid interest rate and they will bid discount when they make their bid. And so they're both competitive, and we'll make a determination once we receive all the bids what the best bid was when you take into account the discount, the premium, and the interest rate. And that'll all be laid out for you when we come back with the sale results. So I don't have a dollar amount per se. I would say the average discount that is taken on a 10-year note, maybe like $5 per thousand. That would be the maximum we would see.
Okay.
Typically.
Other questions or comments, or is there a motion to recommend this to the Common Council or to not?
Move to recommend.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Alderman Strelchuk,
Aye.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
Aye.
Alderman Nervin.
Aye.
And that is recommended to the council. Since it's a unanimous vote, I cannot see a reason why you would stay for the regular meeting. Anybody plan on changing their vote and making this very complicated? 25 minutes or about an hour from now? No, go home.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. You
too. Thank you. The next item we're going to discuss is ordinance 2021-1616, and this is our new public property sign code ordinance. And I would just add one thing in case people, just to preempt one question I expect somebody might have. In your packet, there were 3 documents. The first document was actually put in there inadvertently, the clean copy of the ordinance. That's the ordinance that you originally received a month ago, and it's not what we're discussing. What we're discussing is the red line that follows it. Those are the changes that are made from that ordinance, and then the potential addition that's there for blues. Doesn't mention the word blue anywhere, but that we, at least I don't think it does, but the blue signs. So that being said, City Attorney, do you have any?
Sure. Just very quickly. Effectively, there's one primary change within the general ordinance itself that relates to the whole concept of the message board signs that we have both across the streets in front of or next to the Gateway Monument, and then also the library one just to our north here. Effectively, what the proposed version in front of you today does is it gets rid of that free zone concept. I think we heard pretty loud and clear last month that there wasn't a whole lot of support for that kind of concept, with the idea that we want to see what types of things that we can do. This particular version of the code, I will tell you, does lean heavily into the concept of government speech, which is a area of First Amendment law that is about as confusing as the rest of First Amendment law. So it's an area of law that is evolving and changing fairly frequently. In fact, there was just news recently of a case that the Supreme Court agreed to take up and consider regarding those types of issues. And so it will be changing, as we've discussed kind of throughout this process. Those changes are going to cause us to have to continually review and monitor what we're doing here. But in terms of what's before you, it really is designed to accomplish a lot of what the signs presently accomplish. The typical city type events that are on the sign, which when we review the history on the sign over the last 12 months or so, does in fact tend to be the bulk of the messages that are on there. Those would be able to continue here. Additional messages that we may wish to do, for example, vaccination, get your vaccinations, those types of things. Those types of messages would be something that this body ultimately would approve. As part of that, I think we likely may look to a policy that we would kind of guide us when we get to that point. But that's that version. The additional piece to what's going on is that I'm scrolling the wrong way, sorry. Is that you have the piece that addresses the blue signs. This is not physically part of the code changes that we've marked up and included. Primary reason for that is that, at least in my legal opinion, the risk is just not worth the reward. We've done an analysis, a preliminary analysis of the signs within the community, of the 12 to 24 signs or so that are out there that are within our inventory. Only about 5 of them, or there's only 5 businesses that have those types of signs. Some of those businesses, in fact, have more than one sign. So when you're looking at that total 24, Bear Arms, for example, has at least 3 that I can think of. Off the top of my head, it may be even more. And so it's, in terms of businesses within the community, very few. The bulk of the signs really are for churches and parks are the primary, and schools, I should say. MATC has a couple signs, as does Concordia. Some of the Concordia signs may be eliminated. Right now, the Concordia signs are really designed to try to direct traffic because they don't have a direct exit or entrance to the interstate. That obviously is going to be changing as part of the I-43 project. So it may be that some of those signs, even in themselves, would be removed just as part of that process because it's no longer necessary. So that's the kind of reward side of that discussion. The risk side is, as we've talked about, obviously the most constitutionally certain position is, kind of the, no regulations at all. When you have regulations, that's where you potentially run into issues. The more that your code makes distinctions as you're moving along, carves out areas of differences, that's where you're creating some risk. And this particular instance is an area where that potentially occurs, because it's something that you're allowing some individual signs at the expense of others. We've obviously drafted it in a way to try to minimize that by limiting the number, requiring the annual fee, limiting locations in ways that we think we can defend if we were to be challenged. But it is a point that somebody could point to and say, hey, here's an example of why your code is invalid. And so for that reason, it continues to be my recommendation that we would not include the blue signs.
I'd like to take up the primary ordinance first and then discuss the blue signs if we could, so that we can get through the, to the extent people have questions, comments, or suggestions on the primary ordinance, and then let's take up the blue signs, because I assume that's where maybe the bulk of the conversation will be. Unless anybody has a strong objection, questions or comments regarding the main body of the ordinance that we provided to you on the red line version. Please don't direct them on the clean version. Alderman Strelchak.
I'll be brief. This is exactly what I was hoping you'd come forward with. There's a lot to this. We want to make sure resident rights are respected and free speech is respected, but we also want to be able to conduct city business. And I think what you came forward with after working on this the last month is much closer to really what the city needs, and it also keeps in mind what we need to do for the residents. So great work on it, and I like where this is going to go, and I'm planning on voting in favor of it.
Anybody? I thought I saw another hand. Oh, Alderman Parrish.
Sure, after Rob, I'll be brief. I wish this was proposed to begin with.
Yes.
I mean, why did it take all those months? Thank you.
Because it's an incredibly complicated area of the law. I mean, and it's moving, and frankly, this has more risk than the last version did. If you're weighing risk and reward, it's just, we think this is a more doable version, a more practical version. The free space area would have been a more defendable position. Alderman Urban.
I know it was frustrating to get to this point, but I think, while this probably isn't perfect, it might be perfectly balanced for now. And we can always continue to assess it as we move forward. We may get challenged. We may have to adjust. Case law might change, as the city attorney pointed out. But balancing not wanting to have the proliferation of signs in a free area, while that might be the most defendable position, it was problematic for many. It got lots of complaints from citizens at large not wanting more signs. I think this is a good compromise and likely a very workable solution, at least for the
Can we get a
future.
Oops, I thought you were done. I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Rude on my part. Can we get a motion to recommend this, and then we'll do after we vote on that, we'll have a separate motion on the blue sign
Second.
thing. And
Rob moved, I second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of recommending this to the council? Is there any discussion on the underlying motion? Alderman Boucher.
So in section F on the single-family residential subdivisions, that's part of what we're talking about, correct?
Yes, correct.
So the only change I would recommend in there is that it discusses if there's 50% or more damage to one of the residential subdivision signs. I would think that I would like to see that from natural means. If there is vandalism, I don't think that that's fair to include in this.
I agree.
I would point out that language mirrors what we currently have in our ordinance for non-conforming signs. And I would also note that section F is, out of the main body of the ordinance, the most troublesome provision in the ordinance. Just allowing them at all potentially opens risk. But we figured there's no good way around it since they already existed. We tried to word it in a way that works, but, Alderman Parrish.
I spoke to Administrator Jones about this, and I don't know if I need to amend what we're about to approve, but there's a reference to the free area in here just accidentally. It's on section F6 on page 68.
Well, we should take that out.
The second part of the paragraph, it says, nevertheless, the public has the ability to post non-commercial signs on private property and in the free area defined below, thereby ensuring that the public, et cetera, et cetera. So
we took that out.
That's fine. Just want to make sure what we're
We
recommending.
missed one.
Oh, well then so the motion would be to take that out also.
Yep.
Okay, now, but we were talking about an amendment that Alderman Boucher was offering. Was there a second?
I'm sorry, can you go back and say which one was?
Okay,
got
on the
Alderman Bushy's-
subdivision sign, Alderman Boucher was saying that if the sign is damaged from vandalism, then they can rebuild even if it's over 50% of the value of the sign. The thought on the 50% is if you're rebuilding the sign anyhow, and the 50% was to try to create a substantial. If a car bumped in and knocked a couple of bricks off, we're not going to make somebody move the sign and what have you. If you're going to incur most of the cost anyhow, the thought was at that point, and Director Towson, am I stating this correctly? That you might as well get in conformance at that point when you're over 50%. So is that a motion you're making? I'm not saying you can't. It's certainly up to everybody.
Discussion point.
Okay. Alderman Strelchak?
We had our subdivision sign vandalized, just kid went in, kicked it in half and yanked it off the thing, and it was like $6,000. But I don't know, I know how big of a headache it was for an HOA that meets a couple times a year to figure out even what the bid is for the sign and what process that was and everything else. Now that they got to bid out the rest of the relocation and everything else, and if insurance would actually cover that, I think some of that gets a little overreaching from our standpoint. I would be concerned that it would just create an overly cumbersome process for residents if we in fact did, as you said, if it was vandalized and then they had to move it and then get bids for the stonework or come to the table and prove to staff that it's 50% if it's close. I think that's kind of a long process. A brief statement stating, if in the, if it's damaged either, by fault other than wear and tear or something like that, then,
Director Towson or Mr. Zader?
Struggling with the words on what to recommend.
I want to ask a question that follows up on that, though.
Yeah.
This 50% thing doesn't apply to signs in the islands. It only applies to signs that are elsewhere in the wrong location, because signs in the islands can be relocated. Do you have any idea? I mean, are there a lot of signs that we think are in the street reserved area? Do I have the right term? Street reserved area?
I think we do. I think recently with subdivisions, though, we've been asking them to put them in outlots.
Okay.
So I think your historic subdivision signs are probably in what we're now defining as the street reserved area.
Just
Would you guys
picturing a
agree?
lot of them behind sidewalks, back from the road.
20%.
Okay.
So then I would like to propose that as an amendment to what was stated, to not apply this in the case of vandalism.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Discuss. Any thoughts, Mr. City Attorney?
I guess to your point that you were making, in my mind, it doesn't make much of a difference whether it's damaged by a car driving into it, a tornado
I'm
taking it
wondering the
out.
legal side.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, the point behind having that in there at all is that at some point we have a fully compliant city and we don't have any of these signs left. And so the more exceptions that you make to when we get there, you do create a little bit of risk. Probably my opinion is that the level of risk is fairly small. Or not much different than just having them allowed in the first place. From a legal perspective, I think you could go either way.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Or a vote, please call the roll on the amendment.
Alderman Bushy?
Aye.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Garrow?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
Aye.
Alderman Schneider?
I'm going to say no. I just think it's cleaner that way.
Alderman Nurbin?
No.
Okay, the motion
Aye.
passes.
Forgot me.
Oh,
Alderman Strelchek?
Forgot me. I got a very large land mass of a district. That,
is there a yet? Is that an aye?
It was an aye.
Okay.
It was an aye before that.
Okay, so we have the amendment passes, and now if any further discussion on the ordinance as a whole, we'll get to section F in a second. Hearing none, please call the roll for recommending this to council.
Alderman Meyer?
Aye.
Alderman Hancher?
Aye.
Alderman Garrow?
Aye.
Alderman Parrish?
Aye.
Alderman Schneider?
Aye.
Alderman Nurbin?
Aye.
Alderman Strelchek?
Aye.
Alderman Bushy?
So we're in agreement on the underlying ordinance. Now, section F, discussion. Or a motion. Alderman Garrow.
So the blue signs are going, right? This pretty much says blue signs, we're just not gonna have them? Right?
The code as just recommended does not include provision for the blue signs. What we're now talking about is whether we're going to add that into it.
And so there's language that's on pages 76 and 77 of the packet that would be, if you're going to have it, staff is recommending that is the provision that would get added to allow for the blue signs.
Okay. So, if we just got rid of the blue signs, the hospital sign would have to go. We got blue hospital signs.
Those are safety signs. It's required.
How about the block watch signs? Block watch signs could stay or go? All right, how about the adopt a highway signs? Okay, so everybody who has a block watch and it's got that sign up to prevent crime, those would have to go.
I'm not sure that's accurate. I think that would take an interpretation on the safety sign. Yeah, why don't you come up to the table also if you could? Shouting from the back is not always.
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Yeah, if you want to stay there, please pull the mic up.
I'd have to look, but I believe the provision was that unless it was required by a committee, that they would not be.
Oh, you're right, it's been installed by the city. So yes, those would not be, or by a governmental entity. There will ultimately be amendments to this ordinance, no matter what we do. You know, staff tried to think of, and I was involved in those discussions, the stuff we needed to the extent we find something, we'll come back, or somebody else finds something.
Yeah, I mean, certainly over the last couple months, each kind of iteration, we've come up with something new that, oh, what about that sign? So, yeah, I think that's correct.
Yeah. So, I think you got an answer, right?
Well, what's it? I thought, did you say no? Or
I don't
yes?
think they are, but the mayor is correct. There's a section that says warning signs and temporary emergency signs installed for the public safety.
Is it warning signs are yes? It's a warning sign? I'm trying to
You're
figure out what
criminal.
I'm trying to figure out the answer.
But I think those are installed by the city, and the block watch are not installed by the city, aren't they?
Well, from this point forward, we don't allow any signs installed in the right of way that we don't install, but we have a murky history at best with some of those previously installed signs. I'm not sure we can trace back who the original installer was.
The city installed our block watch sign, our block watch
Yeah,
sign.
all of them in recent history have been. I'm just not sure we can trace all the way back in some of them, whether they were installed by the city or not.
Because, you know, they came out and they picked where they went, you know, and they put them up where they're supposed to be, and they've just been there ever since, so.
Well, and Ms. Lundin, that process is similar to other processes where the community or the subdivision would come to the city and say we'd like, and then the committee would make a decision as to whether we would install or not.
From this point forward, again, there are signs that predate that practice, but yes.
So I would say based on the language of the proposed code, that type of sign would be acceptable or would be allowed, assuming that it was approved by the city.
A
and
warning
installed by the
sign
city.
installed for the public safety.
Okay, then I have one other suggestion, only because this is a pretty difficult thing for all of us to do, is I always found whenever I had a issue, I'd look for other people who had, you know, when you're starting something, you look for, you know, who's done this before, who's done this before, who's done this before, and try to learn from somebody else and try and instead of trying to reinvent the mousetrap. And I have a suggestion to make, is that we went to one person, with the guy in Madison, his ideas. I think it was like 8 years ago, I gave up, you know, sacrificed 2 days of my life to interview city attorneys. So I got to meet a bunch of city attorneys at that point in time. And one of the city attorneys I met that I was impressed with, we didn't select him, but I impressed with, was Stan Riffle, and they do 72 different municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. Brilliant guy. For everybody I've ever talked to who's had him as their city attorney, from me, Sir Riffle was very impressed. My suggestion would be maybe get a second opinion and find out what they're doing. If they're doing 72 different municipalities, they may have come up with something other than what we came up with. And I don't think we need to vote on this tonight, but if you check with them and see if they came up with anything and what their ideas are, maybe we can learn something from it. And if we have to delay this a month, we have to delay it a month.
I can actually answer that, and unless it's changed over the last 3 months or so, they have not done a wholesale review of any of their sign codes. There's been only a handful of cities within the state that have, and none of their municipalities were included in that.
But back to,
or at least if they did, they didn't respond when I asked who's done it.
I just find it interesting that our municipalities doing this, and they've got 72 of them that they're not even concerned about it. That's all.
because we were threatened to be sued, and multiple lawyers said we were at risk.
Well, they would have to be threatened to be sued now too if the Supreme Court said that we were illegal, they're illegal then too.
Back to section, is this F or G? It says G on it, but does it fit in as G? Okay. Back to section G. Comments on section G, or a motion to approve, reject, whatever. Anybody? Alderman Meyer. Sorry, I shouldn't look down when I'm asking for comments.
The section I'm looking at here is II and III.
Which page?
This is in G. That we're looking at the blue. Pertains to the blue sign. II. no person entity may have more than one such sign. And the other one is each such signs facing the same street should be at least half a mile apart. So I would make a change to that. No person or entity may have more than 3 such signs. And each of the signs facing the same street shall be at least, make that to 100 feet.
No.
Motion.
Is that one motion or 2 motions?
I'll make that as one motion.
One motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. On the amendment, first Alderman Nervin.
I'll point out that I think that some fraction of a mile was used with the express intent of keeping them to a minimum. So if you let them be every 100 feet, you could end up with a sign every 100 feet along each one of these roads. I think part II is aimed at individual people or entities having more than one sign, and III is the total capacity of any stretch of road to bear total number of signs. So if it's 100 feet, then we're saying we're okay with a blue sign every 100 feet, which is when you're clipping along at some of these roads are 40, 45 mile an hour roads. They're coming at you pretty quick. Actually, no one will look at them anymore because there'll just be so many of them.
While we can't use the phrase directional
Oh, yeah, I know we
at
can't.
all for
We
it,
can't use the phrase directional. That
but
just means
the
anyone
main
can have one.
purpose of the blue signage is probably that who would ever want one would like to have some concentration in a given area. Not directional, but some concentration in a given area. So taking that to a half mile would forego that opportunity for whoever wanted to have a sign.
I don't think there's anybody who has a concentration that have more than one sign within a half mile. There are some people, and I'm not sure. I could be done by an entity and by a person and by a person. So, Alderman Schneider, please.
I am also not in favor of changing the 0.5 miles. I am not in favor of having a multitude of signs along our roadways. I think it is, they do lose their value if there's that many of them because nobody can concentrate on any signs. And I just don't, I just see them as being more of a distraction at that level of intensity than anything else. So I would not be in favor of the III section being changed under G. And that's it.
Alderman Parrish.
Yep, thank you to my colleagues for pointing out the differentiation. I do believe that we should change II to really just be 3 signs, up to 3 signs, and we should leave triple I alone. I think more, repeated blue signs within half mile kind of clutters the roadway, which was partially what we were trying to avoid. So I'm okay with the half mile. I'm trying to figure out how I don't know if our other colleagues would modify their amendment or if you want me to make a counter. Do you feel strongly that signs could be within 100 feet of each other or just half a mile okay?
Well, we can vote. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. It's a committee of the whole. Alderman Schneider.
I was just going to say we can vote on the proposed amendment up or down, and then if we want to make a different amendment, we could do it that way.
Well, I can still make a motion to split the.
Yeah, I can just divide the question. We'll divide the question. I think the chair has the authority to do that.
Thank you.
So right now we're talking about Romanet 2. That's what you call that. The more than one such sign. The motion is to make it 3 signs. I think you're going to end up with a concentration of advertising that's unnecessary. but that's up to you guys. Any other discussion on Romanet 2? If not, please call the roll on the amendment.
Alderman Hancher,
No.
Alderman Garrow,
Aye.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
No.
Alderman Nervin,
No.
Alderman Strelchak,
No.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer.
Aye.
Then
4-4.
I vote no. On Romanet 3, the moving a half mile to 100, was it a yards or feet? Yards. So you could literally have 10 of these signs in a mile. Is there any further discussion on this? Alderman Boucher.
So I have a question. If no person or entity can have more than one sign, if there's only one sign, then you can't have multiple signs a half mile apart.
Well, you could have a sign, and Alderman Mayor could have a sign, and Alderman Hancher could have a sign. They could be all the same sign, because we don't restrict the number of signs.
We don't look at them.
Right. So you can still have the same number of signs. It's just that I can only have a sign, and you can only have a sign, and Bob's LLC can only have a sign.
But even if you didn't have that, let's assume people thought ABC Corp could have one sign. The reason why Romanet 3 is there is because, let's use real businesses. Summers would have a sign, and some church would have a sign, and those could be every 100 yards. So each person could have one, but they could all choose to be, that's a bad example I gave because there's no church near Summers. But, from that standpoint, you could have multiple people putting signs up and down 1 mile stretch of road. You could have 10 of them, 11 of them, if you change this to every 100 yards. The way it is, every half mile you could have a sign, and but those are presumably different applicants, but it could be, as he said, relatives or whatever, but they're at least a half mile apart on the same road. So if you have one on one road and one on another road, that doesn't preclude somebody from having those 2 signs. Well, 2 different applicants. So it's not that they have to be a half mile apart, it's on the same road.
Should probably clarify that if that's our intent.
Well, it says each of such signs facing the same street.
With the turn down of Roman numeral 2, there's really no need for my motion and Roman numeral 3.
So you're withdrawing the motion?
I withdraw the motion.
Okay, does anybody else have any amendments to this? Or does somebody else want to raise the motion?
Well, can I ask clarification? Actually, weren't you saying is that actually Roman numeral 3 still holds because they can be, right now we're limiting any 2 different signs are still a half mile apart,
right?
Not necessarily the same business sign. So right now we're limiting it, if we each have our signs up, they have to be a half mile apart.
These blue signs.
So I would say that your original motion actually would still hold.
You can remake the motion, I'm just withdrawing.
He was 100 feet.
Is there a motion? Then the hearing none is Alderman Giro.
I guess can't stand this sign code. I mean, we're coming up with these ideas that are so far-fetched. Oh, either we're going to have, everybody's going to be putting up a sign in the middle of nowhere, and it's just a convoluted bunch of crap. Part of it is, oh, what if this or what if that? I mean, I think Alderman Mayer's 100 yards was just fine. Now all of a sudden we go, well, everybody's going to be doing it. You know what? It's never done it before. I mean, people are just going to change their ways and say, oh, we're going to take it. People just aren't going to do it.
We've never invited them before into the sign code. In the past, it was all a discretionary decision by the planning commission, I believe, on whether somebody get one of these signs or not. Now somebody reads the code and says, oh, I can advertise, I can put up a billboard in the city of Mequon on their pre-approved sign. The question is, how many billboards do you want around Mequon? Because these aren't directional signs. They're, anything from Jesus Saves to I hate the Mequon Common Council to the Boy Scouts are great. But have whatever you want to have. Just, it's got to be fair and open to everybody. And the question is, how many signs do you want? We typically didn't, we allowed these discretionarily. We turned some down, we approved some. We tended not to have these signs. There were a few exceptions. Now we're giving people the right to have it, which is actually a more expansive right than what we currently have. And the question is, how many of them do we want around the city? Is there a motion? Okay, Alderman Strelchak.
And there's nothing we can do to just grandfather the existing ones and no new ones, and when they expire and they're done.
Expire what?
Well, if
There is
they
no
don't make their
expiration of any of
payment
those.
or whatever.
The current approvals, they don't ever expire. In fact, one of the reasons why we want this is we have a couple of signs that we don't believe that the person who had the sign installed is even around. We have no way to take it down because it's approved, and it wasn't approved on any condition that it's a 1-year approval, 5-year approval. It's just there. Alderman Parrish.
Just to chime in, that issue goes away though because of the annual administrative fee.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this creates a process.
so but to the grandfathering point, if they fail to renew their application, then they could lose their grandfathering.
And there is a grandfather provision down in Romanet 8. Rob, if you look at Romanet 13. No, is it 8 or 13? 8. It does have a 2026, it's got a 5-year grandfather exactly where they are. And then you've got to get in compliance. Because presumably most of the signs don't look very good after 5 years anyhow. And I don't know of people who are going to lose their signs under this provision.
I don't see the need to add more.
Add what?
What we currently have. So I always get nervous when you give somebody the rights, and that people exercise the rights to way beyond the intent of what we're trying to do here. That it goes a little too far, right? So, my goal with the blue signs from day one was to grandfather the existing, have no more, find a way to legitimize that status ethically within free speech and ethically within any new considerations. It's like when they're done and they're out of business or they can't be contacted for a renewal or just hey, do you still want this? That sign then goes away. But I don't see a need to authorize additional ones unless you've got a real clear free speech argument tonight to litter up the countryside. You got Bonnywell Road. I have maybe one for the park, the golf course, on Bonnywell. I don't want to see them every half mile directing to other places. We don't move to the country to look at a bunch of blue signs for advertising and, unless it says Cub Scouts are great, I'm out, right?
Alderman Meyer?
Can we do something like grandfather in the existing signs for a 3-year period of time after a 90-day window of reaffirmation of the existing signs?
I like that.
What is reaffirmation? I'm not arguing with you. I don't know which of the last part meant.
Reaffirmation of the signs, they have to come back in and reaffirm their signs, so that signs that are no longer in use or whatever, they don't get reaffirmed within that 90-day window, we can take those signs down.
I would maybe argue that that's even worse than what's proposed with this, because at least from a First Amendment perspective, because now not only are you picking winners in that, hey, you were fortunate enough to have one before, so you can keep it, but now you're saying expressly, hey, you got to come back and let us know, and then we're going to give you the okay. We're kind of restamping that approval on it, which I think creates more problems for us.
So how do we accomplish what I'm asking?
I don't think you can.
That's not the answer I want.
Well, I know, and I know that certainly. I mean,
Wheels are turning.
I have always suggested that one of my roles is to try to figure out how to accomplish things that you want in ways that you say let's do it this way, and I say, well, that's maybe got some issues. Let's try it this way instead. I don't see a way around that issue. When you grandfather signs, you are picking a winner, and that creates a whole lot of risk under the case law as it exists presently.
I don't think, you may look at it as picking a winner. Somebody will argue you're picking a winner. I'm thinking the standard from this point forward has changed. And that is the new benchmark moving forward. It's equal, it's equitable. There's no winners or losers. It's everybody or nobody.
No, it's only the 22 people who have them. And nobody else then can do what you allow them to do. Now, if you have it for a 3-year period, that's probably your window of risk that you get sued in the next 3 years. I mean, so you have limited your risk somewhat. And not that they need to get reapproved, but you could do it a 3-year window. But we're only leaving the signs up for people who actually tell us they exist. We'll send a letter out to them.
Yeah, we're not approving the signs again. We're
Yeah.
just,
Everybody gets to keep them.
yeah.
But you do have a 3-year risk, and you may get sued, and then they all go away.
They're just not approved, and we're just not removing them for a 3-year period.
If they tell us they exist.
Are we just kicking the can down the road 3 years?
That's okay as case law.
But then they all go away.
Makes it
This
more
gives you
clear.
an opportunity to have some, if you think it's important.
I mean, we can drop it down to 2 years if we want to eliminate the risk even more. I mean,
Was that a motion?
Yep.
What?
that's a motion.
A motion to amend?
You making
So-
the motion, I'm seconding it? Is that what's happening here?
Looks like it.
2 years.
Great.
They go away in 2 years. All of them go away if they don't respond to a letter from the city letting us know they exist. Brian, do you really think that, I mean, there is a risk for 2 years though.
Yeah, absolutely is a risk.
And it's not just a risk that somebody sues to get a blue sign. It's somebody sues and says, you're letting these people have a sign in our median or in your right of way. I get to put my 4x8 sheet of plywood in favor of my favorite gubernatorial candidate in your right of way also.
But that in itself is inherently bad because now it's giving them the right over everybody else. If they allow that to have a.
Well, no, everybody gets to put whatever signs they want. That's what they'll sue. That's what we had happen this last summer.
Right. That's the argument of somebody who chooses to sue us is you've allowed these signs for no real apparent reason. Therefore, you need to allow me to have my sign. You have violated my First Amendment rights by letting that person have his message but not allowing me to have my message.
I'd rather be the lawyer on the other side of that case. Alderman Irvin.
Said it at the last meeting. I think it made a quote in the paper.
You
The problem is,
speak to the mic a little bit?
the problem is we're trying to use what we think is common sense. Why can't these exist? I think the Supreme Court has told us. If you allow someone to have it, you got to allow everyone to have it. So currently we have no policy. If we've used our discretion, which is entirely part of the problem. We don't have the ability to use our discretion. we don't get to say what the sign is for. We barely even get to judge what's on it unless it's clearly profane. And even that, someone could probably sue you over. See, you need a policy. Either we don't have it for anyone, or we create a policy that regulates it and allows it, and then we need to decide how much is enough, which I think is why we erred on the side of caution, whoever drafted this, to have it be a half mile, so there isn't this massive proliferation of signs. Every 100 yards is 17 signs a mile. If you round down to the lowest integer value, is every 100 yards enough? Is it quarter mile? Maybe a quarter mile is better. It's only 4 signs a mile. I know we're struggling because we don't want to take away what we've already given out to the businesses, and that's admirable. I mean, it's tough to take away. If you allow this, how much is enough? I mean, we should decide how much is enough. If we can't decide how much is enough, maybe we just shouldn't have it. Because someone will do what the mayor just suggested. They'll put their 4x8 hand-painted piece of plywood in the city's road right-of-way, and then when we take it down, they'll say, but you allowed that. Because we'll have no policy.
Alderman Parrish.
Thank you, Mayor. Page 77, as far as the grandfathering goes, says that they'll stay till 2027, January 1, 2027. So I thought I heard you say 2 or 3 years. It's longer.
It's 5.
Yeah, it's 5.
Assuming they pay the annual fee.
Okay. And then can you repeat the motion before? It was hard to hear over here.
The motion is to not adopt section 6G, but to grandfather all existing signs for a period of 2 years, provided that the sign holder confirms after being contacted by the city that they still want the sign, that they exist,
If able
that they
to be
want the sign.
If able to be contacted.
What?
Your concern was that you might not be able to contact somebody, so if able to be contacted.
Yeah.
And upon contact.
So all of these blue signs will be gone, you're saying, in a couple of years?
Keep them for 2 years.
So all blue signs in the city will be gone in 2 years?
That's the motion. Alderman Giro.
Okay, I'm just making sure we're on the same page here.
I have a question then on number 8. Then if you keep that in there, then they'll all be gone in 5 years.
No, the city will relocate them, and it will. For example, some of the signs don't meet the dimensional requirements. They're not uniform size. They're not uniform color lettering. We're saying you can keep that for 5 years. At that point, you get a new sign. We'll reinstall one for you in a place that is allowed, but it then has to meet the criteria. So there's plenty of places for new people who want to put up signs, and therefore grandfathering the existing signs doesn't prejudice against people who want to add signs. That's the thought behind this.
So we had one speaker who came last month, and that was that Cheryl from Bear Arms. How would this, for this number 8, I mean, if we kept the number 8 in there, could she keep those signs that she's got that the city
For 5
installed
years.
For 5 years.
Yep.
Okay.
But then it would go down to one sign.
Well, one less, of course, Bear Arms has one, Cheryl Rebholz has one, Mark Rebholz has one.
And they can all say the same thing.
They can all say that we can't talk about what they say. We can't consider what they say. That's one of the risks, one of the problems with this thing. In fact, we could end up with 40 Bear Arms signs in the city. But they gotta have 4-inch lettering, they've gotta be the right size, they gotta be the right color. I don't know how much space information they can put on. Alderman Boucher.
So just following up on Alderman Parrish's question. So the proposed amendment gets rid of all of Section G, and what would be the implications? An example, for example, Alderman Carroll said.
In Alderman Meyer's amendment would allow Bear Arms and everybody else for 2 years to keep their sign in at the end of whatever date we picked. They're gone. Unless you change the ordinance.
All signs are gone, period.
The blue signs, yes. Unless you, amend the ordinance. But as written, they'd be gone at the end of 2 years. I'd make it as of year end just because it's a clean date, but. So,
And we'll take them out with the plows.
what's that? So we have an amendment that we're not voting on section G at all. We're voting on the amendment proposed by Alderman Meyer. Please call the roll.
Alderman Garrow,
No.
Alderman Parrish,
No.
Alderman Schneider,
No.
Alderman Nurbin,
No.
Alderman Stralchuk.
Aye.
Alderman Bushy,
No.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
and Alderman Hancher.
No.
So that amendment doesn't pass.
Strike two.
Is anybody going to propose Alderman G or a version of G?
So I just, one more question again, just because we have the speaker now. So if we do G the way it is, you get like a 5-year grandfathering and then it's gone.
But she still has to pay the annual fee.
Yeah.
It's not gone. At
For
that
what?
point, she can have her sign, but it can no longer be tacked to a stop sign. So it'd have to get moved onto a standalone post. If the sign isn't the right size, and some of them may be, some may not, of the speakers, she'd have to get a sign that meets the requirements. You know, but she could keep her sign for longer than 5 years under G. It's just no longer kind of almost complying.
All right, then I'll make a motion for, to keep G the way it was written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Alderman
What was the motion
Boucher.
again?
What?
What was the motion again?
To
Approve
add G to the ordinance. Alderman Boucher.
So it wasn't included here, but there's the reference to that annual fee and the cost of the signs. What is
It's
the annual?
referenced there.
What is the, no, I mean, there's
Well,
reference.
we're gonna have to adopt
We'd have
one.
to.
That's part of the process through the Finance Personnel Committee on, we're gonna have to amend the fee schedule.
Just as long as we don't make a fee of like $10,000, you know, as a
Well,
way to
I'm
get
assuming you
around
won't
it.
vote for that. Alderman Strelchak.
I'm voting against this, and the only reason that I'm voting against it is because I don't want to add more blue signs to the countryside. I'm all for grandfathering. I'm all for grandfathering people in perpetuity versus the 2 years. Although we made a motion for 2 years just to not put the sign code at risk for lawsuits. So just explaining why I'm voting no on this one.
Anybody else have a comment, or can we have a vote? Please call the roll.
Alderman Parrish,
Aye.
Alderman Schneider,
No.
Alderman Nurbin,
Aye.
Alderman Stralchuk,
No.
Alderman Bushy,
Aye.
Alderman Meyer,
Aye.
Alderman Hancher,
Aye.
Alderman Garrow.
Aye.
Okay, that amendment will go to the Common Council. I don't like it, but that's what it is. That is, so now we're gonna move back and we're gonna do this fairly quickly since we're already 20 minutes behind getting to our Common Council meeting. The only really, we need a motion to approve. Did I do the motion to approve the January 22nd?
Yes.
The January 11th minutes? Okay. Departmental reports. Those are not here to have each person give a report. It's here for your edification and to give you an opportunity to ask questions if you want based on what's in the individual reports so that the council knows what's going on in individual departments. Any questions for, and this is not an opportunity to beat up on staff, it's an opportunity to be educated on what they're doing or to see if there's some prioritization that you wish was different than what's presented. Anybody? Alderman Boucher.
So on page 11, as one of the project status is the OIT crossing. Do we have an update as to when there's a potential? I know that there's
It's a good
outstanding.
question. Director Lundin.
I know there's outstanding questions with the state yet, I believe, but do you have any?
Just one, the RRFB.
What's that?
Just one, the RRFB.
The light,
Yeah.
So then,
warning light.
is there Are we waiting on that then before we get a
No, WISTAT is
timeline?
waiting on us. We just met as staff today. We'll send a proposal back. We're requesting pedestrian activated flashing beacons as opposed to our RFBs.
We're splitting hairs based in part on
Terminology.
we had a meeting with the DOT, and it sounded like they might allow that.
So-
Pedestrian or bicyclist activated, but yes.
So then,
Kind of comes to the same thing, almost.
I'll assume as such. So then, if it does get approved in the process, what would we have as timeline for starting the project potentially?
The design consultant is currently going back through the scope of services that was approved in November of 2020 to reevaluate and renew to let us know if there's any scope adjustments based on all that we've gone through with WISTAT. The scope has certainly evolved since we initiated that design, and that will ultimately determine that schedule.
And that's an item, in fact, I thought about asking just to have a report of tonight, but perhaps next month you kind of plan on a short update, if you would, please.
Well, and fingers crossed, if we have resolution from WISTAT, we can show you the final concept plan as we finally move forward with design.
Okay.
A little different, but not a lot different. Anybody else? If not, we don't have any future policy items for discussion, consideration, or analysis on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting?
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning this meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
We will re-adjourn as the Common Council at 7:55.